Hello everyone, welcome to another part of chapter 1. So in today's video we're going to talk about quadratic equations in real life applications questions. Generally I call this big quadratic question because a question like these that you're about to learn is like almost certainly coming out for the exams. Absolutely, every year it comes out. Okay, so just a quick just to go through the structure of all these questions. You can see that over here, the prerequisite to solve this question is actually your chapter 1 part 1, which is your fractional algebra. Okay, so that is the most important one, because most of the equation you form will end up being those kind of things, so you got to solve from there. Okay, so for the question, let's start here. You are required to form an equation. So you see, you form an equation, but usually they won't tell you how to form. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you a few examples, more common ones. So the common ones are Pythagoras theorem, speed time, and then rate and proportion. These are the three contexts that are the most common ones that you will have to use to form the equation. So see, so forming is the first step. And then usually they want you to simplify to a certain look. So usually it's something equal to 0. And then you're supposed to solve the equation. And then after that, using this x value that you just solved for, you're supposed to use the answer to find the answer to some other thing. Okay, so saying like that is not very obvious, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to just go through one of the more common ones. So you can see that the first one is Pythagoras theorem. So we're going to use Pythagoras theorem in this question. So this is an example of a question. So we're going through in more detail here, which is the first time. So you can see that based on the question, they give you a land in the shape of a right angle triangle, and then the sides are these three sides. So they even provide a diagram for you. That's quite friendly. And that's it. They ask you to form an equation and show that it becomes this. So if you are not familiar, you'll be absolutely clueless. Like, how do we do this? They didn't say anything, correct? So some of the hints that you must know is that right angle triangle, all sides you have. So in a right angle triangle, there's only two things you learn. It's either all the trigo ratio or Pythagoras theorem. And since you need to form an equation, something must be equal to something. So the only way is to use Pythagoras theorem, where this square plus this square equal to this square. You can see the equal sign comes out. So that's why the next step will be, you see, x squared, which is this square, x plus 6 squared, which is this square. Then if you add them together, here, equal to this square. Yeah, so that's how you form the equation. So from this first line, you are supposed to simplify this to eventually get this one. Okay, so how to do this is pretty obvious. You just expand all the brackets. But unfortunately, some people, even at Sec 3, they still cannot do this. They still think it's x squared plus 36. Seriously, you need to wake up your idea, because this and this are both a plus b bracket square. And hence, if you expand this using the special identities, it's going to be a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. I think it's a bit too small. Let me zoom this further. Yeah, so this is special identities. You see that this thing is being used again and again. You need to know this. Okay, so this x plus 6 bracket square will become these three terms. This 2x plus 5 bracket square will become these three terms. And once you've expanded correctly, it's as good as done. So in this case, I will just shift all this to the right side. And then I achieve the equal to 0. So of course, I need to check, okay, exactly the same shown. Okay, so next step, if you look at the next part of the question, they ask you to solve. Now, you will notice that it's the same thing. Okay, they ask you to show this, then ask you to solve this. Now, in the worst case that you really cannot get this, you do not just leave the whole thing blank. You can still start from here and solve it normally. So you look, imagine you cannot do this part, you're just clueless. But you can still do part 2, and then you're just going to start from here and solve. So how to solve this? This is the quadratic equation, what we learned in the previous part of the chapter. So you get the A, B, C out, whack the formula, use your calculators app to calculate, you notice that I write down a longer decimal. Even though the question says 3 decimal place, it's important that you have this longer decimal, because in subsequent calculations you must use the longer one, not the rounded off one. So you see 3 decimal place, sure, I give them the 3 decimal place at the end, but before that I still must write the long one. Okay, so that's solved already, so it's done. So after that, they'll ask you find the perimeter of the triangle. If you go back to the diagram, where's the perimeter? The perimeter is just this all add together, isn't it? It's common sense. It's really nothing much. It's just common sense. So I do this. I add the 3 sides together. So I just want to simplify in this case. So these 3 terms, I'm going to simplify it. Becomes 4x plus 11. So this is my so-called expression for the perimeter. And then I need to sub the x in, because x, right? So you can see there's 2 choices here. It's either 1 point something or negative 5 point something. Now common sense tells you that if one of the side is x, then clearly x must be positive. It makes no sense that it's negative. How do I have negative? So sure enough, you sub the 1 point something, and notice I used the longer decimal. I didn't use this, I used this one, the longer one. Very important. So I sub it into this 4x plus 11. So you see 4x plus 11, and I calculate. So that is the final answer. So this is an example of a long question in the Pythagoras theorem context. Now in the O level, this is worth slightly more than 10 marks, which is like a huge proportion of your paper 2. It's pretty important that you get this correct. Okay, so next one.